This event is organized by the UN Institute for Disarmament Research, UNIDIR, as many of you may know, in partnership with the Ludwig Maximilians University Munich, Conflict Armament Research, the West African Network for Peacebuilding, and the UN Human Rights Innovation and Analytics Hub. As I was introduced, I'm Alexa Timlick. Currently, I'm a doctoral candidate in the Cluster of Excellence, the Politics of Inequality, at the University of Constance. And previously, I was a research associate at PRIO, the Peace Research Institute Oslo, with FUSE, the Violence and Impacts Early Warning System. And I'm delighted to be your moderator today. This panel event falls perfectly within the conference theme as we move from early warning to early action, and in the attempt to bridge scientific innovation with policy and practice. In fact, as many of you are probably aware and has been discussed throughout the past few days, armed conflicts have reached their highest level since World War II, no matter your definition and on how you collect the data. Widespread illicit proliferation of weapons is fueling not only violence in general, but sexual violence specifically. And here today, we're looking at how can we effectively use arms-related violence risks to strengthen early warning. Here, the event will provide an interactive space to discuss innovations in arms data collection and how these innovations are used or could be used to concretely support early warning and anticipatory action, including for the prevention of conflict-related sexual violence. The event will consider the relevance and obstacles in addition to helpful avenues like technologies to strengthen the use of such data for violence prevention. I look forward to high-impact demo inputs by renowned panelists, of which we're very briefly introduced by name, and will shortly hear more about what each of them are bringing to the panel today. After, it will be followed by your contributions and questions, of which we'll do our best to get through everything that people may be wondering about. Now, before we dive into these demos that I mentioned, it is my pleasure to hand the floor over to Hannah Salama, a researcher at the UN Institute for Disarmament Research. She will introduce the topic to us in greater depth. Hannah, please take the floor.
Thanks, Alexa, and thanks, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with everyone online. I think that, the organizers planned for this to be an interactive event. So before I start with my introductory comments, I'd like to do a Mentimeter. I'd like to get our thinking going. So if you have your phones with you ready, please scan the barcode. And you can also check in the chat. We have a link to the Mentimeter, so you can do it directly from your browser. And we just have two questions for you today to try to get a sense of what you are feeling on this topic, what you are thinking. And the first one is, do arms and ammunition data play or could play a role in your own early warning system or violence prevention work? So I see that some people say no, that's fine. Some are saying yes. A lot of people are saying yes, and a lot of people are unsure, which is great because, for this event, we're going to try to clarify exactly the ways in which arms data could help. And then, so we have 14 people plus 2 for yes. So 2 already actually play a role. That's really encouraging to see that 3 respondents have already taken into account arms and ammunition data. Okay, it's really great to know that people are thinking that it could play a role, but it's still kind of underused if we're looking at this very short or very small sample of people that we have in the room. I actually don't know how many people we have in the room. Okay, we can maybe move on to the next question in the interest of time. So do you agree with this statement? You can give us on a scale of 1 to 10. Experts from conflict or violence prevention, anticipatory action, and early warning would benefit from improved arms and ammunition data. So obviously, those who already use arms and ammunition related data would have to strongly agree. And those who think not, we have a pretty good convergence on more towards the strongly agree. So that's good. It's good to hear that we will be speaking about a subject that people are curious about. They think that it can play a role in early warning, and that they agree that it could, more information and knowledge on this topic could benefit them. Okay, sounds good. I will just jump in with a few thoughts here before we begin. Um, so I think Alexa had already mentioned that armed conflicts are at a record high since World War II, and we all know that they've had devastating humanitarian and long-term impacts. And these conflicts could not survive really without the proliferation and misuse of arms and ammunition, and in particular, small arms and light weapons. So these weapons not only fuel, but they exacerbate and sustained armed violence in general. They also directly facilitate conflict-related sexual violence, which is used as a deliberate strategy to terrorize civilians, control territory, and dismantle community cohesion. And we're seeing this, the incidence of conflict-related sexual violence rise, and we're seeing this in almost all conflicts. And with regards to early warning of armed violence, including conflict-related violence, conflict-related sexual violence, early warning is potentially a critical tool. When it's done right, it could enable anticipatory action and prevent the outbreak and the escalation of violence, or it could mitigate its consequences. Therefore, improving early warning capabilities and tools is really key to preventing today's conflicts. And these really rely, early warning really relies on access to all relevant data that can improve the performance of these early warning systems, including data on arms and ammunition. Um, it really sounds natural that data on weapons flow and misuse can signal arms-related violence. However, UNIDIR's research has shown that in reality, arms-related data is used sporadically for early warning of violence, including in my own research on CRSV, it's used very little, and the potential remains underexplored. So we saw that some people in this room are already using it, but the majority still think that there is a potential to use it. So it's being underused. Um, the fellow panelists that we have today were chosen because they are trying to address this gap through innovative measures. But first, I wanted to briefly outline two ways in which UNIDIR tries to add to this collective effort to improve, the use of arms and ammunition data in early warning. So on one hand, in 2024, UNIDIR partnered with Views, PRIO, and Conflict Armament Research to launch the initiative Arms Flows and Early Warning. This initiative seeks to strengthen the utility and the use of arms-related data for more effective early warning to build innovative bridges between experts from both thematic fields, so from the early warning community and the arms control and disarmament or arms data community. As of this, this was really a participatory and multi-stakeholder process, and leading experts identified key data requirements, gaps, challenges in harnessing arms-related data for early warning efforts, for either by the use of traditional or more kind of advanced computational methods. Importantly, they co-developed concrete pathways to strengthen data collection and suitability to enhance knowledge sharing, promote policy uptake, and facilitate partnership. Different implementing actions have been undertaken since we are very glad that this is an emerging community of practice and it continues to foster the sharing of promising develops and to inspire further action. So please, if you feel that this work is relevant and your work is relevant to this kind of initiative, we would love to hear from you as we're continually looking to grow this community of practice. So the second thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is that UNIDIR has been investigating the linkages between the proliferation of small arms and light weapons and conflict-related sexual violence. In 2023, our report found that in 6 conflict settings where data was available, between 70 and 90% of incidents involved a firearms, While maybe that's not something, surprising, it really underscores that arms control can and should support the prevention of CRSV. This also means that arms-related risks need to be part of how we think about CRSV early warning, which is a field that or a practice that we have in the UN as well. We built on this research in 2025, and we looked at how UN peace operations can better integrate arms control measures, especially since UN peace operations are really at the front line of the UN's response to CRSV. How can they improve arms-related data collection, and how can this data collection be used to support early warning of CRSV? So we continue to champion the inclusion of arms control in CRSV prevention. Just to say that UNIDIR is a member of UN Action, which is an interagency network that brings together 27 entities to strengthen coordination, advocacy, and efforts to end sexual violence in conflict. And we're also pleased to be working with OHCHR's Innovation Analytics Hub to contribute our expertise on arms and ammunition flows to help scale the early warning of CRSV, which you'll hear more from George. And so I hope that I stuck to my 5 minutes. But with that, I'll hand it over back to Alexa, and I really look forward to discussing and exchanging with you later in the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, for starting us off. For everyone in the audience, CRSV refers to conflict-related sexual violence, just in case there's anyone that is unsure. And so thank you again for starting us and introducing both UNIDIR's work on CRSV and the initiative established in 2024 by UNIDIR and partners that has helped pave the way to this panel and other events today. Now, I'm pleased to hand the floor over to Professor Dr. Paul Turner, the Chair of Empirical Political Research and Policy Analysis at Ludwig Maximilian University Munich. It will be a presentation on one of the first innovations for large-scale data collection for arms data for early warning. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, panel members, and thank you, audience, for your invitation and also for your interest. Let me share my presentation. So the proposed title of our presentation is Bottom-up Science of Arms Monitoring, a Hybrid Expert in the Loop Semantic Data Pipeline. We demonstrate some developments of our project here. So the starting point is a profound transparency crisis in arms control and arms monitoring. But as we know, military buildups need transparency. Otherwise, we run into well-known problems of misperception and of arms races. Insofar, the project proposal we presented last year in Geneva remains highly relevant. There we proposed an automated collection of data on militarization trends using a bottom-up approach via open science and a collaborative open science. Meanwhile, based on third-party funding and our collaboration with the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, we have made significant progress in this regard, both in the technical implementation and even more so in the theoretical conceptualization. While in our last presentations, the focus was still on transfers, for example, small arms, light weapons, major conventional weapons, rebel group endowments and transfers to rebel groups. We have now significantly, considerably extended our design to include possession, procurement, production, involves companies and their supply chains, industrial policies, and collaborations in our design. You may ask why this complexity? Now, it should be obvious that the escalation of risk not just comes from transfers alone, despite these transfers are a very important proxy. Now, our expanded armament graphical database includes all relevant actors and their relations. The data collection is driven by an explicit and comprehensive model of the nexus between defense, security, and conflict. That is, armament processes and the risk of the violent usage of weapons are connected via many steps in sequential games. For example, many actors are announcing support or withdrawal of support, as we see currently. Some are actually transferring weapons, and some are eventually using weapons. Quite different stakeholders are involved here across different levels. That's important. They have varying perceptions and are using explicit and implicit threats. This is what we intend to represent with our data. And as a consequence, risk forecasting, statistical machine learning-based forecasting at the country level, at the country diet level, or at the rebel diet level in a grid cell should entail systematic, qualitative, analytical reasoning. And this is meanwhile our major conviction. Insofar we blend a differentiated qualitative and quantitative approach. And this is shown here, at least some parts. Let me shortly introduce or demonstrate how we implement this as a data pipeline architecture. So the figure, the left part of the figure, here automated data collection is achieved through bundling of parallel sub-pipelines that feed into a data pool in real time. And note again, this is no more just about transfers, but also about possessions, production, and so on. The resulting semantic data pool, as compared to traditional keyword searching, will be utilized in two different ways. First, it can be used immediately and automatically for real-time risk forecasting without extensive data validation. Naturally, the human analyst here should understand what is a harmless signal and can be ignored, and contrary, what could be a potential trigger to a conflict diet and incite an escalation. This is indeed a fascinating new area for complex prediction studies. Second, the innovation I would like to emphasize today is the involvement of an organizational infrastructure. This is the Stockholm Institute, International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, which we call the experts in the loop, right? In this loop, experts continuously validate, update, and successively consolidate the incoming data streams in an implemented interface. But importantly, this validation leads to a continuous training and improvement of the pipelines themselves. After a consolidation phase of about 10 to 12 months, the data is made available to the scientific community. Now, what is the value, the added value and the strategic objective? First and foremost, we would like to contribute to a new collaborative bottom-up approach of arms monitoring and arms control, thereby securing essential transparency and hopefully conflict prevention. Second, of course, this database can be also used for real-time statistical or machine learning-based forecasting. Although we expect more potential for qualitatively driven forecasts and foresights. Why? because the interdependencies between many actors have to be specified in different ways as today, and we have to continuously update probabilities for the parts of the model trees. Third, in addition, now we show this here in the third box, manifold perspective on defense, security, and peace can be theoretically reimagined and empirically analyzed, like the global, for example, the global network topology of the defense sector. And fourth, this is essential, I think, in a sector which is prone to lobbying and capture, as we currently observe. Yeah, I'm happy to provide more information in a discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Paul, for shedding light on this innovation and demonstrating how a bottom-up approach can be pursued for real-time arms data collection, blending both quantitative and qualitative approaches. I now want to invite Bruno Langiani, a data analyst at Conflict Armament Research, to share other innovative approaches, this time with a focus on more localized data collection. Please have the floor.
Thank you, Alexa. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to UNIDIR and the Data for Peace organizers for the invitation. I want to greet all the other panelists sharing the virtual table with me. My name is Bruno Langiani. I'm a data analyst from Conflict Armament Research. Forgive me if I look a little sleepy, but I'm speaking from São Paulo, Brazil. It's a bit early on my end. When a weapon is recovered from a non-state armed group, say in Sahel, Syria, or Myanmar, it frequently carries a serial number, an import mark, or arsenal mark. And each of those, in effect, is a piece of data about who manufactured, who legally owned this weapon, and at what point along the chain of custody this item was diverted. The reason conflict armament research identify the item and its component and extract every mark and piece of it, every part of this information is straightforward. We usually learn a lot about illicit weapons flow only after violence has already happened, and we want to close that gap. We want to understand more on how those weapons reached that conflict. A brief word on who we are. Conflict Armament Research is an investigative organization with field teams that physically document illicit weapons, ammunition, and related material recovered in conflict zones. We usually document them in situ at the point of recovery or very close to it, alongside with national authorities. We then identify it, we trace it, and try to unpick the chain of custody. So who manufactured the item, who first held it legally, and when and where it was diverted to actors that should not have it. This is very usually not like desk research. It's hands-on work, serial number by serial number, component by component, done in places where these weapons actually surface. I'll share two concrete examples of how this kind of work can connect to early warnings, the very theme of our panel here. The first comes from a diversion standpoint, which is where my organization specializes. When we trace weapons and ammunition through procurement and supply chain, we sometimes identify attempts to purchase like quantities or types of materials that fall well outside the declared end user ordinary capacity. A small unit, sometimes with like a very few years in business or very few months in business, ordering volumes that go beyond any realistic operational need of the this type of enterprise, or an intermediary suddenly placing orders that do not match its prior commercial profile. So these kinds of anomalies on their own, of course, are not proof of wrongdoing, but as a pattern, they could be red flags pointing the possible illicit behavior, or as an intent to channel material to an unauthorized third party, including a non-state group. In the current environment of many conflicts, as Alexa, our moderator, was mentioning, we monitor the activities of non-state actors, and we think this is like a key important activity to do. If those procurement signals were detected and shared early enough with the right partners, they could feed anticipatory action before those weapons ever reach the conflicts, rather than after. The second example I prepared to share with you today is one we think could be used from an early warning angle. So this is the systematic monitoring of illicit arms market in local and regional conflicts fueled by non-state actors. So CAR's experience and doing this collection also with local collectors suggests that these markets, these illicit markets, carry interesting signals for us if you track them consistently. So in practice, what we do is like to build over time a catalog of which weapons models and which ammunition calibers are being offered, both in physical illicit markets, so weapons bazaar, for example, and increasingly on social media. So let's say Telegram, Facebook, Instagram, and we monitor also their price, the price these weapons are being offered. So two patterns are particularly relevant here. First one, prices. A sustained rise in the local price of a given caliber or for a weapon model type usually indicates rise in demand among armed actors, and this rise in demand usually precedes an escalation in armed activity. Second, the appearance of new or unusual material, like a weapon model that has never circulated in this place or in this market before, or ammunition from different origin or a caliber that was not so frequently seen in that scenario, could be a flag for us. So in Somalia, where we have been doing this work for years, this sequence usually play out. Items that surface it in market first, and that we and other later associated persons can see those weapons in armed confrontations. So what happened is market, like the prices signal first, and violence comes after. So that's exactly the kind of pattern and early warning systems that could be built to catch, especially when we are talking about non-state groups. So that non-state groups who are not using like the legal transfer channels that are monitored in general by the official reporting systems. So to close my statement, arms flow data is often described as like technical, sensitive, and hard to share. And it's all of those things, but some of it is already being collected in real time on the ground by organizations like ours and others. And this type of work, of course, demands investment and consistency. For you to do this kind of monitoring, you cannot do like 1 month and drop in the following month. So this type of work demands investments and consistency, but the opportunity is less about like inventing entirely like new data streams and more about like building the partnerships that allows existing field level signals. On diversion attempts, on market dynamics, so that we can better inform the early warning systems that do predictive work. So thanks again for the opportunity to join the panel, and I want to thanks for the opportunity and hand it over to Alexa, and I'm of course open to any clarification if needed.
So thank you, Bruno, for taking the time to join us and for this in-depth demonstration on the need of long-term monitoring and how it's not just a one-off data collection. Now, I'm happy to give the floor first to George Hodge, head of the Data Solutions Unit of the Innovation and Analytics Hub at the United Nations Human Rights. If you can take the floor, please.
So yes, as highlighted, my name is George and I work on data solutions at the UN Human Rights Office. And I'm going to present a project that we are working on that is intended to integrate a broader spectrum of data and bring that into the ongoing monitoring of conflict-related sexual violence, in particular through the monitoring and reporting arrangements on CRSV. I'm going to talk a little bit about the issue itself, about the framework that we've applied, who we're working with currently and how that can evolve, and then the underlying technology, and if there's time, also a little bit on data gaps, very pertinent to this discussion. So let me begin. So, a key element of an awful issue like conflict-related sexual violence is that it is chronically underreported. And this happens for many reasons, including stigmatization, fear of retaliation, issues around humanitarian access, among many others. And these all contribute to suppressing reporting on the issue. Another element is that, of course, by definition, the issue is incredibly sensitive. And so, of course, like many other aspects of human rights monitoring, do no harm principles, human rights due diligence, and a human rights-based approach to data flows through the work. Now, as a result of underreporting, waiting for instant data can be problematic. And so a broader approach needs to be taken to risk. And so what we have done is taken the UN Action Network's framework on conflict-related sexual violence. Now, this is a framework that has about 84 different risk signals, broken down into 10 domains. And some of these include conflict and armed actor dynamics, gender structural vulnerability, impunity and justice system capacity, and relevant to this discussion, weapons and firepower dynamics. And what we've done is that we've worked with women's protection advisors and the human rights components of peacekeeping operations, as well as other OHCHR field presences, to contextualize this framework and to supplement it to strengthen the human rights lens. So, of course, it's a global framework. Not every risk signal is applicable to every country. So, these experts have helped to highlight specifically which signals are most relevant to the particular context they're working in, and then also to bring additional signals to strengthen the human rights lens that flows into the framework. Sorry. So yeah, in terms of who we're working with, as highlighted, women's protection advisors, these are deeply embedded within peacekeeping operations and mandated to bring together all the different components of peacekeeping and the broader UN system to address the issue of conflict-related sexual violence. Of course, also OHCHR field presences were fundamental and continue to be very important in this work. And we're at the current moment in time, those are the key stakeholders working with, but we're about to move into another phase where we're looking to engage with women's-led organizations and protection networks. And the idea being to better understand how they could benefit from the operationalization of the framework in data. Potentially certain data streams and risk signals are particularly relevant to them, and to make that available to these different networks and also benefit from their insights as part of the broader integrated approach. And then beyond that, we'll be open to working with other stakeholders in this issue. In terms of the technology itself, what enables this is a data platform that we're about to launch, and you're seeing some snapshots of this play on the screen now. This is intended to have both a public interface, but also enable us to share controlled access to certain data sets and data products with particular communities of practice. In terms of how the information is integrated, and we do use AI. And that is predominantly used for either aligning the categories that we find across structured data sets that are relevant to a particular risk signal. We basically recode them and deduplicate and resolve the entities. Or it's used to extract structured information from unstructured text. There is a lot of very useful, well-researched, qualitative analysis that can be used to operationalize some of the signals under the overall framework. And so we use AI to pull that information out and get it into a format that works as part of the overall framework, that then enables the delivery of data products and any follow-on modeling. In terms of gaps, at present, under the weapons and power dynamics domain of the framework, we have, reasonable structural data. It is low resolution and low frequency, annually produced. And I think what we need to see is much higher resolution data of the type presented by Professor Turner and Bruno. And as Bruno was saying, that the field level signals would really strengthen that particular dimension of the UN Action Network, plus, or supplemented with human rights lenses. Operationalizing that domain better would be a great benefit for this work going forward. Thank you for the time, and looking forward to further questions and interactions. Back to you, Alexa.
Thank you, George, for demonstrating both the importance of tailoring to country and environment context and also the transformation of existing data sources for these initiatives. Now, we're going to look at how arms issues are considered in more traditional early warning efforts. For this, I will ask Edward Yombula, Regional Coordinator for Early Warning, West African Network for Peacebuilding, to take the floor. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see my screen. Great. So it's a pleasure to be here and to share our work with colleagues and also this very important conference. I want to briefly talk about what our early warning system is all about. The architecture is rich, and then I would definitely talk about challenges and opportunities, and then the enhancement efforts, and then some options for response. So the early warning and response program of WANEP is a flagship program. And over time, we've been able to develop what we call WANEP Alert and Response Mechanism, WAM, which is our approach to support peace and security efforts in Africa, and particularly West Africa, where we engage local communities in identifying and reporting on threats to peace and security. The mechanism has two strands. One is the National Early Warning System, which is an online data collection tool that relies on open source information collection from eyewitness reports, report from the media, and ASA, and even report on the ground, and how those information are fed into the system, and of course for further analysis and different accuracy checks before they are produced into a different product for our various clients or partners. So we have ECOWAS and the African Union that also benefits from the system. Once we collect data, we verify data, and we input this data into ECOWAS and the African Union Continental Early Warning System for further analysis and action at the higher level. On the other strand is where we offer services like capacity building, joint planning, security briefs, and then policy and practice advice for our partners as well. And in that context, we have the AU REX state agencies, partners, private businesses, and so on. But that notwithstanding, we also ensure that because we collect data from community from bottom up, we also ensure that subnational level actors are also engaged along the line. So we also engage local traditional leaders, religious leaders, and even at the national level, national peace infrastructures, local peace committees are also engaged, and they also benefit from the data that we generate from the communities. So the system, we have over 550 community monitors, and these monitors reside in those remote villages and communities where they monitor events and incident data. And also they use some sets of predefined indicators related to proximate conditions of conflict at the community level. And then also they report these into the system. And then where we have our analysts who also look at the data and be able to produce different products that we share with our partners. The system covers all 15 countries across the region. And in terms of arms data, because it's really holistic, it covers a lot of other conflict events. But in terms of arms data, what the system looks at are those things that we track, in terms of arms signals. Our monitors report on observable phenomena. That includes influx of weapons into communities, arms seizure, armed violence between farmer and herders, and then gang violence and the use of weapons in urban crimes. So we ensure that within that context, all the issues that we're supposed to handle are also checked and verified before we engage our different partners. So our community monitors, on the other hand as well, observe influx of these weapons. They see trucks at night. They hear conversations in the market about arms. They notice when young men in the community acquire weapons they could not previously afford. They report mobilized fighters returning and armed that are with arms, and those that also have disarmed as well. But what I want to state is that this is very contextual and it's action specific, and it's a very timely, real-time reporting. The system looks like this, where we have a quick snapshot of the event. If you look at the geolocation pins, if you hover around them, you can see a brief summary of the incident that have been reported from a particular community. And the monitors use this platform to report. And then, of course, at the regional level, as well as our national offices, we have our managers who also see these events. And when there are real threats and that we need to quickly mobilize response, we quickly generate some kind of reports and share with relevant authorities for action. So the system itself looks at some arms related indicators from we have of course 18 incident categories in terms of our indicators, and then of course we have like 132 subtypes indicators, and those that I've highlighted here are those that have to do with issues around arms and small arms and light weapons. So you can see agro-pastoralist conflict, armed attack, chieftaincy conflict, crime, which include other fraudulent activities, demonstration, whether it's violence and there is some use of some kind of small arms as well, election-related violence, gender-based violence, homicide. These are all critical threats that we also have indicators that this system looks at. Then we have our situation report, which is done weekly, and it has 50 conditions or indicators that we also report on as well. And these conditions are also very unique to each country, and then where we used to gauge what is happening. And then they also have issues around weapon influx, armed seizure, armed violence, demobilized fighters, and of course, where we also look at actors' identifications as well. So in terms of the challenges, we have seen over time where conventional, the threats has actually evolved and the landscape has transformed over time. Now we see where we have things like drones and improvised weapons used both online and offline markets, sale of some of these kinds of weapons. But what is critical here for us to understand is that our monitors are not experts in some of these kinds of weapons. So we see that as a challenge, and that is one of the areas where we want to strengthen our system going forward. And then the political sensitivity of some of the issues we handle as well in West Africa is also key for us to also understand how we collect this data and share the data with all the restrictions and the sensitivities that we have, particularly in countries like the AES where information is seriously restricted. And then also issues around the granularity and verification of data. So monitor sees weapons both at various levels, and whether it's from locally manufactured weapons or those ones that are imported, and then even weapons that are leaked from stockpile as well. They see these kinds of weapons across borders, and then they report on them. And but the challenge there is how do we also verify some of these challenges, particularly when it has to do with the weapons that are leaked from stockpiles. These are the challenges that we confront when it comes to issues of stockpile leakages. And then issues around connectivity problem, because it's an online system. We do have challenges with connectivity in some areas where it's difficult for our monitors to go online and be able to report the system. But we've been able to put in place some strategies to be able to address that as well. And then the gender dimension of that is also key for us to look at, where we have seen issues where gender-related, sexual-related violence has been very critical within the context of the data that we gather. And then WANEP has fundamental work around this, and we have been able to upgrade and improve the system over time. And then as I wind up, I think it's also very important for us to understand that we have various actors who are on the ground across the globe, but also even in the region doing early warning. But we still think that there's opportunity for us to collaborate, opportunities to be able to share our data, share information, and where we have common approach to be able to address issues that relate to how we report on arms and ammunition. For example, you have UNIDIR has over 300 of these indicators, but how do we ensure that what they have, we're able to look at it and review what we also have and see where the commonalities lie and what we can be able to tolerate into our system. And then issues around referral pathways as well is also key, because the issues that we are dealing with, particularly with regards to weapon flow and all of that, they are very sensitive issues. So how do we ensure that we're able to link our local early warning data system to formal states data collection frameworks as well? For now, what we see is mostly what we produce and share with the states, and for states to be able to take action. So we want to see a much more improved collaboration in the way in which we work. And then also in terms of enhancement as well, issues around AI and enhancement of data. I think it's also very important. We have developed over since 2017, our clean data is well on arms, is well over 200,000 that we have on arms. And that alone, we need some kind of artificial intelligence to be able to analyze such data, which of course, Professor also talked about machine learning and some of those things. We might also need to add to what we have as well as part of our system to be able to do data analysis at a larger scale as well. So I'm sure I don't have time, but we have a few recommendations which forms part of these slides, but we are still here as part of the discussion. I will stop here so that we can take questions when appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edward, for being our final panelist and for reminding us both the importance of open source information, that so much good information already exists on the ground and can be used, in addition to the engagement of individuals across all levels. That is extremely vital. And it goes nicely into the wrap up for this panel, where we're interested to hear from everyone here about how you might use or could use arms-related risk signals in early warning, both in general and for the prevention of conflict-related sexual violence, whether this is operational, policy, or research context. And of most importance, we're curious about how everyone here thinks about ways this can move forward, for example, in terms of avenues, support, or partnerships. We only have about 5 minutes, unfortunately, for these questions, in which if you have your hand, you can quickly raise it. And please be succinct in your question, and I will attempt to call on people who do. Otherwise, there's also the Q&A box in which we can attempt to answer your questions. Or additionally, if you have a specific question for a certain panelist, we can help you get in contact with them at the end so that you can get a written response to your question. If there are any hands, please feel free to raise them. Otherwise, if there are not immediately, I see that there's also one question in the Q&A box, specifically for Professor Dr. Paul Turner, that I can also read out, or if you are still here in the audience, the person who wrote it, Andrea Varesco, you can also raise your hand and speak it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It's basically a question on how and if the different type of context and the different type of arms are somehow weighted in the model of the professor. For instance, transfers of a particular type of arm in a context where there is not that type of arm can have disproportionate effect, although maybe transfers in another context might not have that detrimental effect on peace and early warning. And also I saw that the type of arms include a wide range of weapons, including nuclear weapons. And again, I wanted to understand how those different arms are weighted somehow or taken into account. As you know, there's some scholars thinking that nuclear weapons might also have a deterrent effect. So how do you understand that and put it in the model? Thank you.
Professor Dr. Paul Turner, if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Actually, we just presented the broader categories of weapon types that we consider, envisage. Actually, we have the complete exhaustive list of all fine-grained types of weapons that are produced and transferred worldwide. And you are completely right. It's highly important to consider the context, the local context, but also the national context, the regional context, in order to assess the relevance of some weapons that are used either just in communication or actually are being possessed by the actor. So this comes together. This has to match, and we have to know this is our strategic expertise that we have to bring in order to find out, to assess the relevance of specific types of weapons in a given local context. Regarding your second question, why do we use nuclear weapons? I mean, this has always been the core of arms monitoring, arms control, and we currently see that nuclear weapons are, despite they are not being used happily so far, nevertheless they are used in these threat games. So we have this umbrella function. We have seen this in the Cold War, but currently we see this also. They are actively used. Nuclear weapons are actively used in the threat games of actors. It's not necessary to mention them. So we have to consider this also in escalation games. How are they used? And yeah, this can get out of control. So we have also to include this higher level weapons and how they are used in the overall escalation games. That's the reason why we still consider please note that currently all these arms control regimes regarding nuclear weapons are actually stopped, blocked. And insofar, I think it's important for us as experts in monitoring arms proliferation that we should not forget about the nuclear weapons.
Thank you for your response, Professor Dr. Turner. Now, unfortunately, we are having to wrap up as time is running out, and this room will have to be used for the next panel soon. We want to thank you from all the co-organizers, the panelists, and everyone involved in this event for sharing your views, for engaging within this dialogue and discussion, and for trying to see a pathway forward for the importance of this work. This event is just part of one larger journey that we hope can continue through dialogue between both policy and research and those implementing it beyond, since we can discuss this all we want, and if nothing is done, then we need greater engagement in order to move forward. I hope that everyone here, both panelists and participants, have a great rest of your day. Continue to tune in to other panels that are going forward, as Data for Peace is wrapping up with the online events today. And I'll hand it over to Jim as he transitions the room. Thank you, everyone, for joining.